Thank you.
May I
Actually, I have your book with me.
Oh, the translation into
Yes, the translation, yes.
Romanian. Ah,
Looking forward for your next one.
okay.
Okay.
All right.
So,
could I introduce you first?
yes,
May I?
please. Yes,
Because
please.
I've been waiting to read your introduction.
Ah,
So
really? Okay.
it's quite unique. I am 54 years old, married, mother of 2 children. I'm an engineer working at Nokia in a global organization. 2 years ago, I've graduated the Philosophical Counseling Master Program from Western University in Timisoara, and I've also got a diploma for a certified logic-based consultant from the Logic-Based Therapy and Consultation Institute. I'm not practicing philosophical counseling. I'd like to, but didn't have the courage to take the leap. But it has enriched my life and transformed the way I'm thinking. That is a valuable resource, and I'd like to share in any way I can. And today, topic is philosophical practice and antidote for anxiety in the LGBTQ community.
All
Welcome.
right. Thank you, Sam. Let me share my screen just a sec. Since I can't find the button right now. Oh, sorry. Okay. Um, okay. Could you see it?
We can see 3 Socratic walk.
Oh,
there it is.
and now I jumped right to the start. So I'm sorry, but my presentation isn't entirely finished, but I know what I have to say. So why did I thought about philosophy as an antidote for fear and anxiety is that I believe that we live in really troubled times and that we see an all-time high of anxiety and depression. And especially from the political point of view, because we see this race in the extreme right and the tendency to go towards some totalitarian regimes. So, as I'm sure you know, in US, some hours after taking office, the President Trump moved to roll back policies that were put in place by the Biden administration, and including at least a dozen measures supporting racial equity and combating discrimination against gay and transgender people. And among the rollbacks, he resigned the 2 orders that Biden signed his first day in the office years ago. And also, he was like doing retaliation against Emerald Linda Fagan, who was the first female officer that led a branch of armed forces, and she was relieved of command within 24 hours from President Trump's inauguration. So that is the context. And meanwhile, in Romania, the first election tour was canceled by the Romanian Constitutional Court. But even so, nevertheless, the unexpected race of Mr. Georgescu was a shock that many of us didn't see coming because he was, let's say, almost unknown in some circles. So he was not among the favorites, let's say. So it was really a shock, and it was found that it was a campaign that was done on TikTok. And he was practicing the sort of conspiracy theories. And I personally was in shock due to so many educated people who believe that rhetoric. So, although the cancellation itself was sort of, I said, saved by the bell, uh, it was sort of violation of democratic principles. So, let's say the means, even if the purpose was maybe a good one, but the means were at least debatable. So, and I thought there's a common dynamic between Trump's being reelected and Mr. Georgescu, and it's because people are led by fear and by ignorance, and they are so easy to manipulate. And normally the government ignores these categories, but when the campaigns come, that they apply exactly that rhetoric to convince them. So, and these people, unfortunately, I'm afraid they are immune to any reasoning, and they're really hard to be convinced by facts. So, I think that, well, my method actually is applicable to anyone, but I think that the reason I chose this topic as antidote for fear for the LGBT community is that I think that people in the LGBTQ community are facing an extra layer of anxiety because uh, be, besides, let's say, the climatic changes and all kind of things like inflation, stuff like that, they're first of all they're subject to hate crimes and harsh judgment and rejection. And now we see that if Mr. Georgescu will win the election, Romania will be somehow turned backward, uh, turn from the European values and return to the Eastern line, means to Russia, where the future, so in this case, the future of the community will be much darker than the rest of the society. So I think that they are facing a lot of fear and uncertainty. So I believe that embracing any form of philosophy would be useful from a personal and social point of view. So some possible direction, I have three. I thought education from early ages, philosophy with children. Um, and according to Oscar Benefier, he thinks that P4C shall be started really early, like 3 years old, because he said if you wait until they are 18, there is too late. And actually, I believe that is true because all children, little children, are inborn philosophers, but then through education, I'm afraid this ability is lost. Same as I said, the hip mobility that all babies have, but then is lost when we are reaching adult age. So, and also the principles of P4C, caring, collaboration, and creative thinking and critical thinking help building like a healthier young generation. And actually, this is my hope that maybe we will see that change coming when they will be grown up, because I see that they are so much different than our generation. Um, but starting with these kids will understand and accept that it's okay to be different. So, and I have suggested here some stimulus that could be used. So, for example, the story of the elephant, Elmer, that was a colorful elephant among the herd of gray elephants, which could be done like for little children. And then I have the story with the ship of Theseus that I use also in some workshops. That I think maybe you're familiar with it. That the people of Athens preserved Theseus' ship in the port, and it stayed there for hundreds of years, and some wooden planks starting to rotting away, and then they were replaced. And then the question is, is this still the ship of Theseus? Because it looks the same. um, it looks exactly the same, but still King Theseus never stepped on it, right? So what makes you really, it's about the identity and what makes you really you. And then I actually have another one, but as I said, my presentation is not finished. It's something that I made for high schoolers, and that is the name I put is Atlas, which is that god that was carrying the world, and is that the earth is about to explode, and then you are in the committee who has to select uh, from 12 people to select 7 people to be on a starship and to be, let's say, rescued and to continue the human civilization on another planet. And actually here, just as anecdote, I used, maybe I'll show you at the end of this one. I used some characters that were based on real persons. So, for example, that was this lady, which is Ariel Cheki Deranger, who's an activist for indigenous rights. And one character is based on Donald Trump. And to my complete satisfaction, in several workshops, he only got one vote, so he never made it on the ship. I was very happy about it. But in comparison, so um, I had a homeless child who made it every time. So it means kids are good. And even I had the surprise at some point that one boy was selected all the men in the group, no woman. I don't know. I'm not sure if he thought about the human or about the future of human race, but anyway. So that would be so the first step, because I think when critical thinking is encouraged in the young generation, they are less prone um, to catastrophic, not to catastrophic, to um, conspiracy theories and things that are totally out of reality. Uh, and then, as the second step, I thought about an LBC example. And I think the fallacy here, I thought of a case of a parent of a transgender, intersex, or homosexual teenager who's very worried about his kid's future, like his rights being withdrawn, as we see in US, that maybe, let's say, hypothetically, he has started a transition treatment, and then that could be denied or stopped, or that he, of course, can be bullied or physically hurt. And I see that the politicians are using that us versus them rhetoric that was very common to all totalitarian regimes like Nazi and communism and so on. So the first premise is, as a parent, I must keep my child safe, otherwise I am an awful parent. And the second premise is my child is not safe, so his transition treatment is being canceled or something like that happens. So conclusion, I'm an awful parent and something terrible is going to happen. As an exercise, I propose to practice the Stoic philosophy and even to become an activist and fight for your rights. So instead of taking this passive attitude and just being afraid, you start to fight back. And I'm very inspired by the philosopher Henry David Thoreau, who was the parent of civic insubordination. So the guiding virtue here is the metaphysical security. The philosophers that I would propose is Epictetus, of course, that he said, when I see an anxious man, I'm thinking, what does his man want that he cannot control? Then, of course, Marcus Aurelius was my favorite, and he said that don't be afraid of death, but be afraid of not really living. Then, of course, is Henry David Thoreau, who's not only the parent uh, of civic insubordination, but he also has invented this very interesting concept of new economics. That means he thinks that you should only work as much as you need for living, and to calculate, let's say, work just in terms of pure life, right? So he said a walk in the woods doesn't bring me any money, but it brings a lot in my personal like well-being. And at some point he wrote, I think that his house was um, has cost like $20 or something like that. And then I thought of Spinoza also, because he was like banned from the community, and this probably should have been awful, especially given he was Jewish and they are so close to the to keep the tradition, and should have been awful for him. But then he also was able to live his life, write his book, find friends. So eventually, I think he had a, let's say, pretty good life. Then it's, of course, Hannah Arendt and Rebecca Solnit. And here I didn't finish my presentation, but I'm proposing also the Socratic walks, because first of all, is a form of practicing. I'll stop sharing here, but maybe I'll show you some photos from my dissertation was on Socratic walk. So the reason I propose this exercise is because I wrote this article written by Professor Mesaros from UVT, where he proposed this kind of exercise to a community where some people were arguing uh, about the plan to, let's say, build the village. And some was concerned about natural environment, some was a traditional conservator or stuff like that. And by Socratic walk, they sort of build a common conception, let's say. So they realize that, okay, they can discuss, they can find things in common. So I think it's a great exercise to just bring the community, like the same things that some therapists are doing when they ask, so all the people who have like divorced parents or have been abused or have been bullied, and then people realize that no matter how different their lives are, they may have been to sort of common experiences. And also for a category of people like myself, it's much easier to practice philosophy as you're walking. So I will try to show just very briefly. I think I have some 5 minutes left. We can stop if you like. I just want to show you some photos. And also Socratic walks, I think they're very versatile tool because you can do it like with a theme, for example, or visiting some historical places in the city. For example, in Timișoara, I thought it could be one on the same path where the revolution started and where people were marching. Or so it's a very promising and has quite a lot of offer, I think. Okay, so I just wanted to show you some photos if I can. Let's see if I can stop this, start the other. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see that.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, we can
Okay.
see it.
So that was a walk that was led by Professor Mesaros in Timișoara near the university. This is right in front of university. And then we had other near Traian Square, also in Timișoara. And this is very interesting because it's a sort of 3 levels dialogue, right? Because there is an inner dialogue as you're walking because you have to walk or to talk. So everybody's walking in silence. And then there is the dialogue with the group when somebody stops and saying his quote. Here we are also near Traian Square. And there's the Bega River. And then there is a sort of, you can build like a story based on the concepts, right? So here is another Socratic walk that was led by Professor Lobons, and he was in, I'll call it Apple Meadows, where there is a cabin of the university, and we have been there for a retreat. I think you can see here, this is Arohi, and the other is Anka, and myself. So I think that's it with the presentation. Okay. So if anybody has any questions, ideas, concerns.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
have some time now. Questions? Can you tell me what you mean by the Eastern Light?
Yes, this is a sort of rhetoric used by the communist regime, because that was inspired by Russian, and they said the light is coming from the east, right? So we also have this, well, no, that's just a song. But the Eastern light means really that they were sort of, so the communist regime was somehow imported, let's say. So it was first in Russia and then in some additional countries as Romania, right? So because there was a monarchy before that.
Okay.
And there was now we see that the rhetoric of the actual politicians is that a sort of orientation back to Russia, which is very concerning for some of us, right? And even that candidate that I spoke about, Mr. Georgescu, he was a declared admirer of Vladimir Putin. So, and he speaks, his speech is against NATO and against European Union, and again, he's a sort of going back to tradition, for example, stop all the global business and start doing like small agriculture. So for sure, yes, I will start growing strawberries on my balcony, and then maybe you will grow something else and we can trade. So this is totally crazy. So that was what I meant.
You
Okay.
mentioned a number of philosophers, and one of them was Henry David Thoreau. And
Yes.
I was just wondering how Thoreau might serve as an antidote for anxiety in the LGBT
It's
community.
just because he was the father of this civic insubordination, right? So, because I'm thinking maybe this is beyond philosophy, but I'm thinking that people should overcome their fear by trying to actively fight for their rights, go to protests, send letters, do whatever they can.
So that would be for LGBT folks to become activists,
Yes,
essentially.
I think they must.
They must. Okay. Um,
Not they must. No, I know it's not masturbation here. No, no. I think it's an excellent mean to overcome fear, right? Because sometimes when you're afraid and you're anxious, but you're doing nothing, your anxiety just races. But then you actively do something like, okay, I'm going to the protest, then it's dissipating.
hmm hmm Yeah. Um, that's interesting, and I'm wondering if we could delve into the psychology of Thoreau himself. I mean, with the Underground Railroads and the slave trade and all his efforts to.
Yeah, actually, I've been writing a bit because I wrote in my dissertation paper that was about Socratic walk, and I had this book that is written by a modern philosopher, is by Frederick Groh, A Philosophy of Walking, and then I read about Thoreau and the cynics and Socrates himself, of course, and Nietzsche. For example, Nietzsche said that sitting still is a capital sin against Holy Spirit, because since he was writing lots of his books like walking. He said that when you sit, there are only the excretions from your body that go out, so you cannot write anything good if you sit at your desk, right? He said you should walk. Somebody should walk.
So in these times of oppression or fear of potential oppression, given the turmoil that's going on, um, would you think that having Socratic walks for the LGBT community would be a good idea? Actually,
Yes, but not. I mean, not for only for them. So Socratic walks where everybody can join if they like, right? So to bring together people from different categories. So maybe, let's say, a transgender person will meet a very traditional guy. There was this very interesting book about the guy is a sociologist. He's not a psychologist. He's Johann Hari, and he wrote about depression. And he wrote that at some point in the eastern Berlin, there was this neighborhood, Kotti, that is like a dent. It was in the wall, right? And there were the homosexuals, the immigrants, and it was a very cheap area. And then at some point, the authorities raised the rents. And there was this old Turkish lady who realizes that she was in a wheelchair and she realized that she cannot pay her rent, and she decided to kill herself, but she wanted to left a note for her neighbors so that they know what happened to her. And then somebody saw that note and they decided, no, let's go and march for trying to, convince the authorities to keep the rents as they were. And then they made together a very diverse group. So there were like Turkish who were very traditionalist, some homosexuals who had a cafe and who invited everybody and offered like free tea and coffee and stuff like that. And they made a sort of such a connection that eventually, for example, there was this I don't know, homosexual kid who had issues in school, and he was helped by a professor who was otherwise very um how should I say, not patriarchic, um homophobic. And then there was also, at some point, this guy came one day who was very friendly with everybody and giving hugs and so on and so forth. And he remained there with the group. They made a sort of temporary tent where they gather. And then at some point, when there was a march, um, he went to hug a police officer and he was immediately arrested. And then they found that he actually was running away from a mental institution facility, and they took him back. And then everybody in the group, they went and made protests and went to the mayor building and protest until they convinced the authorities to release the guy from the prison. And they released him with the condition that he gets a job and some place to stay. And it was interesting because the author was commenting that, imagine how many of you, if you would be arrested, how many of you have some hundreds of people who would riot for you to
Hmm.
release you, right? So
Hmm.
that is what I had in mind when I said Socratic walks, where people could realize that, okay, so homosexuals or transgender people are just people like us, and who actually suffer
Hmm.
more than we do, right? Because they are under threat, a big threat, and they're afraid, and they are just, you know, we have lots in common. Well, this is what the reason for Socratic walk, because I realized that Socratic walk was an excellent mean to connect with people uh, in the city. So, you know, we had a walk once with Professor Mesaros, and there was these elderly people sitting on a bench, and I stopped. My quote was from Marcus Aurelius, and I was inspired by a statue that was in front of the church. And this old guy came and said, "Do you know whose statue is that?" And I said, like 5 years old, "Oh, no, sorry, I'm Orthodox." And it was a Catholic church. And then he told me which saint it was. And it was a very funny and nice interaction. And he wanted to know what we were doing. And this is a mean also to bring philosophy close to like the larger public, right? Because I do believe that it doesn't have to be confined like in academia or stuff like that, right? It's
Hmm.
for people exactly like Socrates was doing, right? He went everywhere he could meet people.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
happy that you like it. It means really a lot to me because I love your books and your method and you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry, I really like your example, Adriana, of Theseus' ship.
Yes,
Can you tell a little more about how
yes.
you developed this metaphor in your work?
Oh, well, actually, it
What
was,
turns of thought,
I
ideas
can,
arise, and so on?
well, actually, I don't, it was not started by me. I think somebody else told us to our P4C course. I can briefly share it. Somebody, I don't recall exactly who it was, but just I made the presentation and adding some photos and stuff. So this is made by me. For example, this is, can you see? So here is like the let's get to know each other to connect with the children. So for example, I asked them to write down something they know about themselves and something they don't know about themselves, and something that everybody who knows them know about them, and something that hardly anyone knows. So I always started myself saying that, for example, I know that say I'm a dancer. Something that I don't know about myself is I really don't know some of my limits. For example, what would I eat if I would starve? And I really hope not to find that, because I'm thinking about, you know, that period in Ukraine when there was a great hunger and people were eating like cats and dogs and stuff. Or in North Korea was a period also when they ate grass and all kind of stuff. Then something that pretty much everybody knows about you, like everybody knows I love reading, or something that hardly anyone knows about you, like I don't know, people don't know, for example, that I don't have a driver license. Why philosophy? So that is for children. What that does mean for them, and that here were the rules that we are all joining. That there is no right and wrong. That we raise our hands, that we mention what we have to say, if it's a question or a comment or an objection, we're listening to each other, we accept somebody's different point of view. Then there is this slide that I included in my presentation. And then there is this sort of deepening. Say that the two ships are numerically identical. So that means, are they identical? But Theseus never set his foot on ship B. So is his presence on the ship essential qualitative property? So where lies our identity? Is in our body, our mind, our memories, and in what ways are we different, and in what ways do we remain the same over time? And do we think about our bodies differently than Theseus' sheep? Why or why not? And yeah, here we can think of Stefan Zordner theory about we. He has this book, We Have Always Been Cyborgs, which is very interesting because he considered the human being as a sort of cyborg because we were augmented by when we developed the language and then go further with that. And the thought of the day is something I liked, that I am a legendary hero sailing a powerful ship on an epic journey. So that was the ship of Theseus. I really love doing P4C and I miss that, I think. Okay, I think we were over time. Right?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergey.
When I teach ancient Greek philosophy, I put on a toga.
Really?
Big crimson sash. And I take my students outside and we walk around. And I teach from that point of view, right? And there's no books.
Yes.
And I come with questions from the readings. So something like Plato's Apology, or maybe Aristotle's, a paragraph from Aristotle. So we do this, I guess Aristotle called it peripatetics.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the best one.
That was
for a lot of people, because, for example, to me, I'm very hyperkinetic, so it's hard to stay still, and I feel that I'm concentrating better if I move. So I think it's a whole category of people who really have to move in order to think better.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I wonder, I'm always looking for ways to improve my teaching. My students do like that walking around. And so you've been talking about Socratic walk, and maybe are there some similarities to what I'm trying to do, or what would be some major differences? What can I learn about Socratic walk to benefit?
Well, there is a difference because in a Socratic walk, you don't teach practically. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept. It's just that we walk or we talk. So, and then the coordinator can share some quotes to the students, or he can let them choose for themselves, right? And then the group leaves in silence. There is a predetermined trail, let's say. So we go from start point A, go to point B, and then uh, one by the group walks in complete silence. Actually, if you like, I can send you my dissertation paper, which was on Socratic walk, and I'm happy if everybody reads it because, well,
I'd love that. Thank you.
okay, thank you. And then when you are inspired by a sort of place, then you can say, I want to stop here, say my quote, and then all the people in the group can ask questions, and you only have to take one, wherever you like. You don't have to explain and answer that questions. Then the group leaves again in silence until somebody else stops, say his quotes or her quotes, and until the end when everybody has spoken. And eventually at the end, you can sort of write a short story with all the concepts that have been found during the walk. And I think I'll give you a small, but you'll see in my presentation because I've tried to do that for the walk, especially for the walk that we had in Apple Meadows with Florine. My dissertation is not only about Socratic walk. Actually, there was a parallel with the mindful walks, as you will see. So, for example, I give some examples of the quotes that were used that the quotes in this case were given by Florine Lobons. For example, that we live in the best of all possible worlds by Leibniz. And somebody stopped in front of a church because he thought of the theodicy concept, that why a good God allows the existence of evil in the world. Or it was a Stoic quote that do not explain your philosophy, embody it. And it was Professor Lobans, and he says, stop, pick a snail from the road and put it in the grass. Or, I don't know, life must be understood backwards, but live forward, and by Kierkegaard. And when I had my chances, so for example, with Professor Messalor, she let us choose our own course, but I realized all my courses were upon death. So I like Marcus Aurelius very much. So I know that I said that don't act as if you would live like 10,000 years. The death is hanging upon you. So when you still have the chance, be kind. But I am very happy to send my paper because, as I said, I'm happy when people are reading it. So
I feel the same way sometimes.
yes, but also it was not completely finished because I'm having a full-time job, and I realized I was out of time. So I wish I'd had like a few more days, but I didn't. And I thought, okay, I'll submit it as it is, because I knew that otherwise, if I postpone it, chances were that I will never do it again. So, but at some point, I'd like to get back to it and add some chapters, maybe.
Elliot mentioned Thoreau as asked you about that, Thoreau. I was surprised to see Spinoza.
Yes.
I mean, as a first order existential experience, reading Spinoza, I was like, oh, my goodness. Can you elaborate? Why did you?
Well, actually, honestly, I haven't. Well, I read very little philosophy because my interest was rather recent. So, as I mentioned, I'm an engineer, but I mentioned Spinoza because of his life, not exactly because of his books, but just if somebody reads upon his life and understands all his difficulties and how he was chasing away, he was from the community, and he was forbidden to contact them, and even to take that I don't know how they call it, like holy bread that the Jews are having on Shabbat.
Yeah.
And he was sort of like, so probably that's one of the worst thing that could happen to someone, right? That when you remain like totally alone,
Mm-hmm.
you're not, and even the community didn't want to see him again. So he was like completely lonely for a while, but then he made friends, he found a job and stuff like that. So I think what I meant was that also I know that some transgender children are sent away from home.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, only not more than a month ago. I think it was before Christmas. That my kid told me that one of his friends, who is a transgender girl, left her home because um she had some strong disagreement with her father, and needed a place to stay for a little while. And the girl stayed with us for a month or so. And then she just got herself a job and moved away. But then I realized that, to be lonely and taking care of yourself at 18, it's really hard, right? To get a job, pay the rent, and so on and so forth. So it's really hard, right?
Yeah.
And then it's good for them to see that, okay, I'm not alone, and this happened before and it will happen again, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had a situation at the school. One of my students was kicked out of the house for coming out trans, and it was pretty hard to go through.
Mm-hmm.
That student was traumatized, and
And surely this girl was also, because I could see that she was probably depressed. So, and I think this, I have also fighting with depression because one of my kids is having depression. And I had also a period of 5 weeks of profound depression after that. And I'm convinced that some of it was caused by this interaction, right? Because I felt so sorry for her, and I really wish I could help more, but then it was hard to do so because even from physical point of view, so we have 4 rooms, and so my husband and I and 2 children and a dog and a cat, so it was difficult to have another person in the house. And I was really very worried for her, for example, because sometimes she went out with her friends and coming like late in the night, and I was very worried that something could happen to her. So yes, it's really very. And there was this, I'm not sure, I will maybe put in the chat title. There was this wonderful movie that was made by the Romanian director and an actress, and it's about intersex people. And she actually didn't have a script. She just met this woman who was Miss South Africa. She was really a beauty queen. And this woman found when she was actually, I think it was after winning Miss South Africa. Um, she found that actually she has a XY chromosomes, so she was unable to have children. And she found that technically speaking, she was more a man than a woman, right? But she's a really beautiful person that looks stunning. And then she started to think, okay, what makes me a woman, right? And then she answered later, then what makes me a woman is that I want to be a woman, right? And then there was this other person born, um, who was born with both genitals of a man and of a girl. And when she was a baby, she had her penis removed because this is how the doctors decided in the hospital. But then she was more identifying herself as being a man. And she was, of course, very upset that they've done the surgery when she was a baby and had nothing to say. But then also she had XX chromosomes. So eventually it was a very powerful story, and it was the real life of the two persons. So it was not no script, no nothing. So it was um so the movie is just presented at some festivals or so. But they say I I have been on a cinema, and this Miss South Africa, she came and uh, answered some questions, and they said that they just want to raise awareness upon the difficulties of intersex people, and to build, if they can raise money to make a sort of camp when the people could go and the parents, and have a sort of safe space for them. I'm afraid I'm over time, right? Quite a
Oh,
lot.
no, we've got a few minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Any
I'm
other
mindful
questions?
of the time.
Yes, continue with my previous question, Theseus worship. What if the end of the thought process of search of identity, we find nothing?
We find what? Nothing?
Nothing, yes. Have there been such cases in your book?
I think that's okay because it's something you can take with you, right? You don't have to find it right away. It's just something that you can keep thinking, okay, what makes me me? Who am I, really?
Yes, and
And
start
I think this is good for
the
children.
process. Start the
Yes,
process itself.
it doesn't have to be like to get an answer right there, right? No pressure. Actually, I had this teenagers class at another workshop. It was not about Theseus, but there was a mission to Mars, and there was these two choices that again the earth was about to implode, and you had the chance to choose if you escape by a starship or by hmm, teleportation. And then I always ask the children at the end of the hour what they liked or what they didn't like or what do they want to talk about. And this girl said, I really like very much that we talk about that. because it's something that it seems her folks at home were not very keen to talk about death. And I was wondering why, because eventually death is natural and is a part of life, right? So, and of course, children are curious, and you cannot pretend it doesn't exist, right? Because then they will face it sooner or later. So, actually, somebody told me that they had some, I think, some golden fish, and then when the fish died, and she bought another, and but that would look slightly different, and she told her 5 years old girl that the fish was going to some so I don't know, some cosmetic treatment or so, which
Yes.
I am really not sure it's a good idea, right? Because everybody could have like a cat or a dog or a pet or somebody that obviously dies, right? You cannot then of course maybe it goes with a fish, but with a cat you cannot say bringing a new cat which looks different, it's the same cat, right? So it's better to be honest about it and to say yes, the cat died. And even when children ask, will you die? So you cannot promise you won't, right? Because then who knows, you can say I hope not, but really, can I?
So there's personal chance that think about it.
Yes, but
Yeah.
that's
Thank
the
you.
whole point, I guess. But and I really like that it encourages children to collaborate, because in general our education system is based on the individuality, so that children compete against each other, who's the best in the class, and so on and so forth. And um and there is not at all collaboration is not encouraged at all, and it would be tremendously helpful for them, right? Because it's just helping. We are a community, and it's always easier when you're in a community. And actually, I had a class, I remember, when there was this child who was always talking. And then the teacher told me later on that they used to some sort of hiding behind him, right? Because they were becoming lazy, right? Because he was doing all the talking, he was good about it, and anybody else haven't had to talk, right? So, which cannot be good on long term.
Well, thank you,
Thank you,
Adriana,
Sam.
for
Thanks.
your presentation and for your insights.
Thanks.
We appreciate it. I think
Thanks.
we're going to move on now to